My name is Alara. I was 28 years old when the life I thought was mine dissolved like sea foam on the sand. My world, until that point, had been a quiet collection of carefully curated moments, of books with worn spines and the hushed reverence of the university archive where I worked. I was a cataloger of histories, a keeper of other people's stories, never imagining my own was about to become a tragedy of such intimate proportions. The evening was meant to be the prologue to my own happy history. Our garden, a small, walled sanctuary behind my parents' historic Port Blossom home, was strung with what seemed like 1,000 tiny lanterns, their light soft and golden on the faces of our friends and family. It was our engagement party. Liam, the man whose hand I had held for 4 years, the man whose quiet steadfastness felt like the anchor to my more whimsical soul, had just raised a glass. His words, full of shared memories and gentle promises, had settled in my heart like warm honey. I was incandescently happy, a feeling so buoyant and pure it felt almost fragile. I'd slipped inside to touch up my lipstick, my reflection in the hallway mirror showing a woman I almost didn't recognize. Her eyes were that bright, her smile that certain. When I stepped back into the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the murmur of contented voices, I couldn't find him. Or my sister, Chloe. A small, uncharitable flicker of annoyance pricked at my joy. Chloe, younger by 2 years, had a gravitational pull. She was the sun around which our family had always orbited her. Vibrant, impulsive, and breathtakingly beautiful, she often commanded the center of any room she entered. I, on the other hand, was the quiet moon, content in my steady, reflected light. Still, I wanted Liam by my side. I wanted to weave our fingers together and be the solid, happy unit everyone was there to celebrate. I scanned the clusters of people laughing near the champagne fountain. I checked the library, its leather-bound books sleeping in the dim light. Nothing. One of my cousins, gesturing with her flute, smiled. I think I saw them wander toward the old Magnolia Grove, Alara. The Magnolia Grove was at the far end of the garden, a place of deep shadows and childhood secrets. It was where Chloe and I had sworn blood sister pacts and where I'd had my first kiss, not with Liam, but with a neighborhood boy, a clumsy, sweet encounter I'd confessed to Chloe in a fit of giggles years ago. As I drew closer, the sound of the string quartet thinned, replaced by the whisper of leaves. And then I saw them. They were partially obscured by the low-hanging branches of the oldest tree, but their silhouettes were unmistakable. Chloe's arms were wound around Liam's neck, her head tilted back. And Liam, my anchor, my future, had his hands on her waist, his mouth pressed to hers. It was not a fleeting, mistaken kiss. It was a kiss of deep, wrenching hunger, a desperate claiming that spoke of a long and hidden story. The world didn't just go silent, it ceased to exist. The air, thick with the scent of jasmine, became impossible to breathe. It was a tableau of profound betrayal, so cinematic and stark that it couldn't possibly be my life. I was the archivist, the observer, and I had stumbled upon a devastating primary source document from my own history. They hadn't seen me. My body moved before my mind did, backing away with a stealth I didn't know I possessed. My legs were trembling, a violent, uncontrollable shudder. I pressed a hand to my mouth, not to stifle a sob, but to hold in the scream that was clawing its way up my throat. I didn't return to the party. I turned and fled, slipping out the side gate, my silk dress whispering against the boxwood hedges. I walked, then ran, through the quiet, gaslit streets of the historic district, the sound of my own ragged breathing loud in my ears. I ended up at the Mariner's Rest, a sterile, anonymous hotel near the waterfront, miles from the warm glow of my life. I paid for a room with a trembling hand, the receptionist giving me a look of polite, incurious pity. Inside, I collapsed onto the stiff, impersonal duvet, the beautiful, carefully constructed architecture of my existence now a pile of rubble at my feet. My clutch purse, held in a death grip, began to vibrate. A text from Liam. One from Chloe. Another from my mother. My thumb hovered over the screen. The urge to know was a sickness, a morbid curiosity that warred with the instinct for self-preservation. I couldn't face it alone. My fingers, clumsy and slick with a cold sweat, dialed my best friend, Maya. Her voice, usually a warm, earthy rumble, was sharp with concern. Alara? What is it? Where are you? People are starting to wonder. The tears I hadn't known I was suppressing broke free, a torrent of hot, silent grief. I couldn't speak, could only make a choked, wounded sound. Hey, breathe, she said, her voice dropping into the calm, commanding tone she used as a pediatric nurse. Talk to me. Are you safe? I saw them, I finally whispered, the words scraping my throat raw. Maya, I saw them. Liam and Chloe. They were kissing. There was a sharp intake of breath, a silence that stretched for an eternity, and then a low, furious, that absolute bastard. They're texting me, I cried, the sobs starting to rack my body. I don't know what to do. I can't read them. Okay, she said, her voice a lifeline. Okay, listen to me. You have to. You need to know exactly what you're dealing with. No more shadows, Alara. Read them. Read them out loud to me. I'm right here. Her strength was a small, borrowed flame in my profound darkness. I swiped open Liam's message first, my voice a hollow monotone. Alara, I am so deeply sorry you saw that. This isn't how I wanted you to find out. Chloe and it's been happening for a few months. I proposed to you because I thought it would make it stop, make the feelings go away. I thought I could choose the right path. But I can't. Being with you felt like playing a part one knew I could never truly own. Playing a part. For years of shared laughter, of quiet Sundays with the newspaper, of planning a future down to the names of our hypothetical golden retrievers. It was all a performance. A rehearsal for a life he never intended to lead with me. Maya was swearing softly on the other end of the line, a steady, venomous litany. Then I opened Chloe's. Her words were even worse, a masterpiece of self-absorbed romanticism. I know you're hurt, Alara, but sometimes love is a force of nature. It's bigger than all of us. Liam and I tried to fight it for you, but we couldn't. This is destiny. Please don't make this ugly. Destiny. She addressed her betrayal in the language of a grand, tragic romance, casting herself and Liam as the star-crossed lovers and me as the unfortunate, necessary casualty. There was no apology. There was no remorse. There was only the expectation that I would step aside gracefully. A memory, sharp and crystalline, surfaced from the depths of my childhood. I was 12, and our grandmother had given me a beautiful, delicate rosewood music box that played a Debussy piece I loved. It was my most treasured possession. Chloe, then 10, was fascinated by it. One afternoon, I came home to find her in my room, the box in pieces on the floor, its tiny metal comb bent and broken. She tried to see how it worked. When I burst into tears, my parents had rushed in. My mother had knelt and hugged Chloe, who was crying dramatically. Oh, my poor baby, it was an accident, she'd soothed. My father had looked at me with weary impatience. Alara, it's just a thing. Don't make your sister feel worse than she already does. My heartbreak was an inconvenience. Chloe's feelings were the main event. It had always been this way. Chloe was the brilliant, blazing comet, and I was the steadfast, predictable planet. Her desires were treated as urgent, elemental needs. Mine were quiet preferences that could be easily deferred. And now she desired my fiancé. And, just like the music box, he was hers for the taking, and I was expected not to make a fuss. I stayed in that hotel for 3 days, wrapped in a cocoon of grief and shock. Maya was my sole visitor, bringing clean clothes, lukewarm tea, and the solid, comforting presence of her silence. I ignored the endless, frantic calls from my parents. Finally, knowing I couldn't hide forever, I drove back to the house I'd shared with Liam to pack my life into boxes. When I pulled into our driveway, I saw my parents' car. A cold, heavy dread settled in my stomach. I unlocked the front door and walked into a scene that stopped my breath. There, in our sun-drenched living room, were my mother, my father, Chloe, and Liam. They were sitting together, sipping coffee from our matching ceramic mugs. It looked domestic, normal. A cozy family tableau from which I had been surgically removed. My mother saw me first. Her face, a mask of gentle, pitying concern, made my skin crawl. Oh, Ilara, darling. We've been so worried. Worried? They were here with them. Chloe and Liam were on the love seat, not quite touching, but the space between them hummed with intimacy. As I stood there, frozen in disbelief, my mother reached over and patted Chloe's hand. It's a difficult situation for everyone, my mother said, her voice soft and mediating, as if she were resolving a minor dispute at a garden club meeting. But love is complicated. We have to have compassion. I stared at her, my mind refusing to process the scene. Compassion? I finally managed, my voice raspy. He was my fiancé. That was my engagement party. He broke my heart in our own garden, and you're serving them coffee and talking about compassion. My father stood up, his expression hardening into the familiar lines of disapproval he reserved for my emotional outbursts. That's enough, Ilara. There's no need for hysterics. What's done is done. Your sister and Liam have found something real. You should try to be happy for them. Happy for them. The words were so absurd, so monumentally unjust, that a strange, wild energy surged through me. It was a rage so pure and clarifying that it burned away the fog of my grief. You're just being selfish, Chloe said, her voice taking on the wounded, petulant tone that had worked on our parents for 3 decades. You always have to make everything about you. You're just trying to ruin this for us because you're miserable. That was it. That was the moment the quiet, accommodating moon inside me went dark. The years of being secondary, of my feelings being dismissed, of being told to be the bigger person, collapsed into a single, hard point of light. They would never see me. They would never choose me. They were a closed circle, and I was, and had always been, on the outside. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I simply turned, walked up the stairs to the bedroom that no longer felt like mine, and began to pack. I moved with a strange, deliberate calm. I packed my books, my clothes, the framed photographs of Maya and my other friends. I left the family albums on the shelf. I could hear their muffled voices from downstairs, not arguing, not coming to stop me, but likely discussing my theatrics, my lack of grace. When I was done, I dragged 2 large suitcases down the stairs. They all fell silent, watching me as I walked to the front door. And just where do you think you're going? My father demanded, his voice laced with indignation. I paused, my hand on the cool brass doorknob. I looked back at the 4 of them, a strange, broken family unit. I'm going to build a life where I am not an inconvenience, I said, my voice steady and clear. I hope you'll all be very happy together. I walked out, closed the door softly behind me, and did not look back. That night, I blocked all their numbers. A few weeks later, a heavy, cream-colored envelope arrived at Maya's apartment, where I was staying. A wedding invitation. I dropped it into the recycling bin without opening it. Many of our mutual friends, and even my mother's own sister, my Aunt Carol, were appalled when they learned the full story. They called me, they sent messages of support, they chose my side. The perfect, polished facade of my family began to show its cracks, but I was too busy trying to piece myself back together to notice. The first year was a landscape of gray. I found a small, 3rd-floor apartment in a less fashionable part of the city, a space that was entirely my own and crushingly lonely. There were mornings when the grief was a physical weight, pressing me into the mattress. I missed the idea of my family, the flawed but familiar rhythm of our lives. I mourned the loss not just of Liam, but of the woman I was when I was with him, hopeful, trusting, and safe. I took all that shattered energy, all that pain and rage, and I channeled it. I poured it into my work at the university archive. I became relentless. I took on disorganized collections nobody else wanted, spending months in the dusty, climate-controlled silence, bringing order to chaos. It was a tangible, soothing metaphor for what I was trying to do in my own head. I enrolled in a master's program for archival and information science. I studied, I wrote papers, I worked. My life narrowed to a single, focused beam. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to build. After 2 years, I completed my degree and was promoted to a senior archivist position. The new salary allowed me to move into a beautiful, light-filled apartment in a modern building downtown, with a balcony that overlooked the harbor. It was my sanctuary, a fortress of solitude and peace. I made new friends through a book club and a hiking group. I was creating a life on my own terms, a life free from the gravitational pull of Chloe's needs and my parents' expectations. 5 years passed. 5 years of quiet, steady, uninterrupted peace. I was 33, the head of special collections at the university library, a position I had earned through sheer tenacity and passion. The pain of the betrayal had faded from a raw, gaping wound to a thin, silver scar, a reminder not of what I had lost, but of what I had survived. I rarely thought of them. They were ghosts from a previous life, figures in a story I no longer read. Then, one rainy Tuesday evening, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost always ignored them, but a strange premonition made me answer. Hello? Alara. The voice was thin, hesitant, and strangely frail. It took me a moment to place it. It was my mother. My blood ran cold. 5 years of absolute silence, and now this. What do you want? I asked, my voice devoid of warmth. Oh, Alara, thank God. Her voice broke. We need your help. It's Chloe. Of course. It was always about Chloe. I have to go, I said, my finger already moving to end the call. No, please. The word was a desperate crackle. Please, just listen. They're in terrible trouble. She told me the story in a frantic, disjointed rush. After their wedding, a lavish affair I heard about through the grapevine, Liam and Chloe had taken their gift money and Liam's inheritance to launch a high-end lifestyle brand. It was all bespoke furniture, artisanal pottery, and curated experiences. It had been a spectacular, hubristic failure. They had burned through their capital, taken out enormous business loans using their home as collateral, maxed out dozens of credit cards, and then, in a final, desperate move, borrowed a huge sum from a private lender who was, she whispered, not a bank. Now, they were in debt to the tune of nearly $250,000. Their house was in foreclosure, and the private lender was making threats. Everyone has helped, my mother sobbed. Your father and I, we've drained our retirement savings. We even cashed in the bonds we had for any future grandchildren. We were hoping. Alara, could you help? Just to get these men off their backs. We don't know what else to do. I stood in the center of my beautiful, peaceful living room, the city lights shimmering through the rain-streaked windows, and a laugh, sharp and humorless, escaped my lips. The audacity. The sheer, breathtaking gall. After 5 years of treating me like I didn't exist, their first communication was a request to drain my hard-won security to bail out the golden child and the man who had shattered my life. No, I said. The word was quiet, but it was solid as granite. What? She whispered, as if she couldn't have possibly heard me right. No, I repeated, my voice stronger now. The answer is no. Chloe and Liam made their bed a long time ago. They can lie in it. But we're family, she cried, her voice rising in panicked disbelief. How can you be so cold? Is this about revenge? No, I said, a dangerous calm settling over me. This is not about revenge. This is about consequences. This is about my peace. I will not set myself on fire to keep them warm. They forfeited the right to ask me for anything 5 years ago, in a garden full of lanterns. Goodbye, Mother. I hung up and, with a steady hand, blocked the number. My own hands were trembling, but not from fear or sadness. It was the adrenaline of a final, definitive act. The closing of a door I should have bolted shut years ago. I thought that would be the end of it. I was profoundly mistaken. Less than an hour later, my building's intercom buzzed, a harsh, intrusive sound in my quiet evening. I pressed the video button on the panel by the door. My heart didn't just stop, it plummeted. It was them. Chloe and Liam, standing in the sleek, brightly lit lobby of my building. They looked ravaged. Liam was thin, his face sallow, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. Chloe's expensive coat was rumpled, her face pale and gaunt beneath her perfectly styled hair. She looked like a ghost of her former, vibrant self. She jabbed the button for my apartment again and again, the buzzing echoing in my silent apartment. I didn't answer. I just watched, my blood turning to ice. I saw her begin shouting my name at the concierge, a kind, unflappable man named David. He was shaking his head calmly, explaining he couldn't let her up without my consent. Then I saw Liam step forward and try to push past him. David, a former Marine, stood his ground, blocking the secure elevator doors. They were trying to force their way in. I backed away from the intercom, my mind racing. This wasn't a family drama anymore. This was something else. Unstable. Frightening. Before I could even process what to do next, I heard it. A frantic, percussive banging on my apartment door on the 12th floor. They must have slipped up the fire stairs. Elara. I know you're in there. Chloe's voice was shrill, muffled by the thick oak of my door. Open this door right now. You owe us. We're family. The handle began to jiggle violently, then twist back and forth. A scraping sound followed, as if they were trying to use a credit card on the lock. My breath hitched. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers suddenly slick and useless. The banging grew louder, more desperate. Elara, you selfish bitch. You did this to us. If you had just given us the money, this wouldn't be happening. Then, a sickening crack. Liam had thrown his shoulder against the door. The frame splintered. Another heave, and the door flew open, the safety latch breaking with a sound like a gunshot. It slammed against the interior wall, knocking a small painting askew. They stood in my doorway, panting, their faces twisted with a terrifying combination of rage and entitlement. Liam saw the phone in my hand and lunged, slapping it out of my grasp. It clattered across the polished hardwood floor. No phones, he snarled, his eyes wild. Chloe advanced on me. You have everything, she shrieked, gesturing wildly around my serene, orderly apartment. This beautiful place, money, you did it to spite us. You have to help. You owe me. She shoved me hard. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the cool plaster of the wall. She thrust a crumpled piece of paper into my face. It looked like a legal document. It's a promissory note, she hissed. Sign it. It says you'll assume our debt. It's the least you can do after everything. My fear, cold and paralyzing a moment before, was suddenly burned away by a surge of pure, cold fury. My brain went into overdrive. While Chloe was screaming and Liam was distracted, trying to retrieve the paper she'd dropped, I saw my chance. On the wall panel next to the now broken door, below the intercom screen, was a small, discreet button marked with a bell icon. The silent alarm. It was connected directly to the building's security desk and, by extension, the local police precinct. A feature I'd noted when I moved in, never dreaming I would use it. I lunged for it. Liam saw the movement and grabbed for my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh, but he was too slow. My fingers slammed down on the button. I held it for the 3 seconds required to send the signal. It made no sound in the apartment, but I knew that downstairs, in David's office, a silent alarm was now screaming for help. I wrenched my arm free and backed away from them, a strange, terrible calm washing over me. They hadn't noticed. They were still lost in their own desperate, ugly world. It's over, I said. Liam gave a harsh, barking laugh. It's not over until we get what we came for. Oh, I'm not talking about that, I said, and for the first time in my life, I felt a truly chilling smile spread across my own face. I pointed up at the small, smoked glass dome on the ceiling of the public hallway, just outside my shattered door. I'm talking about this. Smile for the camera, Chloe. The entire building's security system records on a continuous loop. The color drained from their faces. They stared from the camera back to me, raw comprehension dawning in their eyes. At that exact moment, a piercingly loud alarm began to blare from the hallway, the building's audible response, triggered by security. And cutting through that noise was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard, the rising and falling wail of police sirens, growing rapidly, terrifyingly closer. They were there in under 2 minutes. 2 uniformed officers and David, the concierge, stepped out of the elevator, their faces grim and professional. They took in the scene in a single glance, my splintered doorframe, me pressed against the wall, my phone on the floor, and Chloe and Ryan frozen like panicked animals. Chloe immediately burst into tears, the practiced, theatrical sobs of her childhood. Officer, thank God. My sister, she's having a breakdown. She's trying to throw us out. The lead officer ignored her completely and looked at me. Ma'am, are you all right? I nodded, finding my voice. It was shaking, but it was clear. They forced their way into my apartment. They broke down my door. I pointed at Liam, assaulted me. That's a lie. Liam blustered, trying to regain some semblance of control. This is a family disagreement. It's a civil matter. Sir, David the concierge interjected, his voice firm. Your family disagreement involved attempting to physically bypass my security desk and then breaking down this door. We have the entire thing on video, starting from the lobby. That was the final nail. The fight drained out of them, replaced by a gray, slack-jawed terror. As the officers cuffed them and read them their rights, Chloe's eyes locked on mine. They were wide with disbelief and a desperate, pleading horror. Alara, please, she begged, her voice now a pathetic whisper. Tell them to stop. You can't do this. I'm your sister. I looked at her, at the woman who had stolen my future, danced at my funeral, and then blamed me for the wreckage of her own life. And I felt nothing. Not triumph, not pity, not even anger. Just a vast, quiet emptiness where my love and obligation for her used to reside. I watched them being led into the elevator, their heads bowed in shame. And as the polished steel doors slid shut, I felt a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying lift from my soul. For the first time in 5 years, I was completely and irrevocably free. A week later, my doorbell chimed. On the video screen, I saw my parents. They looked smaller, older, defeated. I hesitated, then buzzed them in. They stood awkwardly in my entryway, their eyes taking in the evidence of the life I had built in their absence, the art on the walls, the shelves overflowing with books, the quiet hum of success. My father, a man I had never seen show a moment of emotional vulnerability, had tears welling in his eyes. We were wrong, Alara, he said, his voice thick and broken. We were so wrong. After the arrest, the phone started ringing, my mother added, her voice a hollow monotone. Your Aunt Carol. Old family friends. They'd heard what Chloe did. They were ashamed of us. They said we failed you. And they were right. We finally saw what everyone else saw all along. We are so sorry. It landed with a dull thud. They finally saw it. Not because they had a moral awakening, but because their public image, the thing they cherished above all else, had been shattered. Their apology wasn't for my pain, it was for their shame. I took a deep breath. The old Alara, the one who starved for their approval, would have wept with relief. But that Alara was an artifact from a bygone era, stored away in the archives of my memory. I hear you, I said, my voice gentle but firm. But you aren't sorry for what you did. You're sorry for how this makes you look. You're sorry you were exposed. They opened their mouths to protest, but I held up a hand. It's all right. I accept your apology. Not for you, but for me. So that I can be finished with it. I forgive you, not so we can pretend it didn't happen, but so I can finally let it go. I looked them each in the eye. But forgiveness doesn't mean amnesia. And it doesn't mean reconciliation. That door is closed. The person you're apologizing to, she doesn't live here anymore. I walked them to the door. They didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. 6 months later, the golden light of late autumn spilled into my apartment. The air was filled with laughter and the scent of roasted rosemary. Maya was there, along with other friends, my real family, the family I had chosen. We raised our glasses. To Alara, Maya said, her eyes shining with fierce pride. Who built her own damn castle, drawbridge and all. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I stood on my balcony, looking out at the glittering tapestry of the city. I had heard, through Aunt Carol, that Chloe and Liam had taken a plea deal that involved extensive counseling and bankruptcy. They'd had to sell everything of value and had moved into my old childhood bedroom in my parents' house. Their grand, destined love had crumbled under the weight of real-world consequences. I felt no joy at their downfall. I felt nothing but a quiet sense of order restored. I thought of the family I had lost, and for a moment, a familiar pang of sorrow echoed in my chest. But it was faint and fleeting, a ghost of a feeling. It was replaced by a deep, unshakable sense of peace. My value was not determined by their approval. My happiness was not contingent on their love. I had found my own light. I went back inside and slid the deadbolt on my new, reinforced door. The solid, final click wasn't a sound of fear anymore. It was the sound of sanctuary. It was the sound of a story, my story, finally being written by me.